In this video we are talking about the Canon EOS C50, and it's one that I've been dying to get my hands on since its launch about a year or so ago, because I'm in pain. Why? Because over the last few years I have spent tens of thousands of pounds on camera gear, and there's one use case where I haven't got the footage to quite where I'd like it to be. Let me explain. This is my second channel. My main channel is an automotive one where I get to road test various different cars that I can get my hands on, which means I have to rig up my R5 to the interior of the car to do my talking head bits. Now, it's not the quality of the footage, it's not the colors or the exposure, it's nothing of the sort. In fact, what it is something which is missing in the C50, which I believe is going to be my saving grace. Something which is going to fix my problems, which is the lack of IBIS. Now, before we get into the IBIS stuff, let me tell you a little bit more about the C50. Chapters are below in the description if you want to fast forward to the IBIS stuff. I'm being summoned. Every year now we come to our local allotment to collect some blackberries to make a blackberry pie. It's kind of become a bit of a tradition. That is my 4-year-old dictator.
What's that? Get your hands up your pants, come on.
This is Canon's baby cinema camera that will not let you call it a baby. It has Canon's 7K OpenGate recording. It also does crop recording, which means that you shoot once and you get 2 formats. 4K 120 for those smooth buttery shots. It's also a 33 megapixel stills camera for those impromptu snaps. It has some great cinema features such as waveforms and false color, and the ability to add your own LUTs, as well as C-Log 2 and 3 for pro level grading. It also has a top handle, 2 XLR ports on the right hand side, and on the left hand side we've got the settings for your audio. On top of the handle we've got a record button, as well as a lock mechanism, as well as zoom cradle. It has a cold shoe at the top, which you can add a external monitor to. However, it does come at a cost, which I'll tell you about in just a few moments. We have 2 card slots, an SD card slot, as well as a CF Express. Canon actually gives you the ability to do hot swaps for relay recording. So when the camera's on, you can open its doors and it will not switch off. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, if you count the one on the top handle, 4 record buttons, and 1, 2, 3, and 3 tally lamps. It also has 5 different Q20 threads for all your mounting solutions. It is very much a hybrid camera, meaning that it does both stills and video. However, when it comes to stills, it does come with a caveat, which we'll cover a little later on. This is a bit of a gateway drug into Canon's cinema lineup in many ways. The moment I saw it, it sounded like everything that I needed for what was missing in my workflow. And the fact that it's a cinema camera, which is not a camera that I currently own, I've got an R5 Mark II and you're watching me on an R3, these are predominantly stills first cameras with great video features. But the fact that this was a cinema camera, it made me feel a little overwhelmed. It means that there's scope for me to learn from them and improve my skills as a videographer. My first semi-pro camera was a Canon 80D. I felt after a few years I outgrew that, which is when I went to mirrorless. See, this is where it all started. A Canon 80D with a kit lens. It is of course a full frame sensor with Canon's latest RF mounting system, and this thing is designed to be rigged out. You can use it in its purest form, like so, or you can go full Hollywood with a top handle, a cage, a V-mount battery system, an external monitor, and anything else you may want to put on here. When it comes to the body, it does differ slightly to the likes of an R5 Mark II, for instance, in that it doesn't have an EVF, which is one of the issues when it comes to still photography. It essentially has 2 operating systems, one for photo and one for video. If, like me, you're coming to the cinema lineup for the first time, there is a steep learning curve when it comes to the menu systems. But again, for me, this is something that I embracing. It has a flippy screen, so you can vlog with it. Is that silly? Is that too much? I mean, come on. What a vlogging setup that is, eh? I guess nobody puts baby in the corner. What do you guys think? Has Canon cooked with the C50? Let me know in the comments. Now, with the basics out the way, let's get in the car so I can tell you a little bit more about my pain points and run some tests, because as of right now, I have no idea what the results are going to be. So let's go find out. So what is this pain point that I keep referring to? At the moment, you're watching me on the R5 Mark II and you're rigged up not just on a camera mount, but a magic arm as well. Now, the reason for this is because I want to minimize camera shake. So this is my way of keeping the camera body as stable as I possibly can. At the moment, everything's fine. Lighting's good, composition's all right. But it's when I start driving, that's when we're going to start seeing the small pain point. Because the R5 Mark II has in-body image stabilization, it means that the sensor is floating around. So as I start to drive over uneven surfaces, the camera and the sensor will try and counter the car's movements and its attempt to keep me steady. But what you end up seeing is just a floating image. And then I'm going to rig up the C50 and then we're going to see a comparison between the two. So at the moment we're at 20mm, in-body image stabilization turned on, and we're on an image stabilized lens. So let's go. Okay, so the first bit of footage is my usual setup. It's a setup that I've been using for a number of years now, so I kind of know how it's going to look like, but let me draw your attention to a few things. The bit that I'd like you to concentrate on is the rear view mirror on the top left-hand corner of the screen. You can see it at times in its almost entirety, and other times it almost disappears off screen. And that is the stabilizer doing its thing. It's trying to make the footage look steady. But by doing so, it creates this floating effect, which I'm not personally a massive fan of. Now, the next footage that I'm going to display on screen is the exact same segment, but this time I've switched off all the in-body image stabilization and the image stabilization in the lens. So let's take another look. So now, if you have a look at the rear view mirror again, you can see that it's pretty consistent in the way it appears on screen, except that this time there's a fair bit of vibration. Now, both of these footages are semi-usable. The first one more so than the second, but even the second one with a little bit of warp stabilization, you can make it usable. But what I find is if there's too much vibration, then you get this sort of jelly effect, this warping effect, which I absolutely despise. I hate it with a passion. Right, now we've rigged up the C50 in the exact same way, same focal length, 20mm, except that this time the C50 does not have any IBIS, the digital IS has been turned off, and the lens doesn't have image stabilization. Now you might be wondering, how is that any different to when the R5's image stabilization was all turned off? And I'll say that's a very good question. Even with the image stabilization turned off in the R5, the axis that holds the sensor together is still moving. It's a floating sensor, if you like. So even with it switched off, as the car goes over uneven surfaces on the road, it's still moving around. Whereas in the C50, it's a fixed sensor. So if the car goes up, the sensor, the camera moves up, so it should move in conjunction. Now, because the camera, despite my best efforts, isn't set in concrete, there's still going to be some small movements, but those I'm confident we can iron out using warp stabilization in post-production. So let's hit the road and see how we fare. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. So the next footage is the C50 with no image stabilization. So again, for our reference point, let's take a look at that rear view mirror again. Again, there's a lot of consistency in terms of how much of it we see. There's just a little bit of vibration, which I anticipated. Now, I could probably make that a bit better with a second magic arm, perhaps, to further steady the overall rig. But in my opinion, this is already about 50% better than the R5 with no image stabilization. And because the vibration is a lot less severe in the C50, if I was to apply stabilization in post, this is what it looks like. Again, this is the same footage, same segment. And again, whilst it isn't perfect, now the big bump, now we good test, it's a hell of a lot better. And for me, that is very usable. And you can see everything's in focus, nothing's moving around. Stabilizer's working hard in certain areas. I'm sure we can all agree that the last one's probably the most usable out of the lot, but let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section. Now, the lack of IBIS has been the talking point amongst a lot of creators, but in my opinion, it's actually preferred in the professional field, because the last thing you're going to want to do is set your scene and have the sensor moving around. You could argue if you're not controlling the sensor, you're not controlling the scene, unless of course it's an artistic decision, in which case that's fine. For me personally, I like being in control of the outcome. If I want that moving, warping and floating look, then I know what I need to do to get it. But equally, if I want the steady, non-moving shot, I want to be able to have the knowledge and the tools in my arsenal to be able to achieve that result. So for me, the lack of IBIS or having IBIS is really not a deal breaker, but not having it, I feel, gives me more control. But if you did want a little bit of stabilization, I think having an image stabilized lens or a digital image stabilizer can eradicate those small jitters and give you the end result that I think is very usable. I recently shot some cars racing around the racetrack with the R5 Mark II on a 7200, and as I was trying to track the cars and pan whilst I was doing photo and video, I felt at times that I was having an arm wrestle with the lens and the in-body image stabilization, because when I was trying to do those little adjustments, you know, 1 millimeter here is probably like 10 yards at 200 millimeters. I felt this sensor was working against me, so it was thinking that maybe that was a jitter, that was an unintentional movement, and it was trying to correct it. So I feel and I felt myself almost battling with the image stabilization, which can be a bit frustrating at times. So it can work for you, but equally it can work against you, just like a lack of IBIS can. Over the last 10 days, I've used the C50 almost on a daily basis. It's been a B cam to a colleague's shoot, which I was supported with, but it's also been an A cam for my own projects as well. I've even used it at home with my family on passion projects. As I've had the C50 for the past 10 days, I've got somewhat acquainted with it. So here are some of my thoughts, things that I love, but also areas of potential improvement. But full disclaimer, this isn't my C50, this has been loaned to me by Canon UK. This is not a sponsored video, no money has exchanged hands, nor will they get to see it before it goes live. The only bias being that I am a Canon shooter. Okay, battery life. This thing is an absolute beast of a machine, okay? It's got fans, it's got 7K recording, it's got 4K recording, it's got some really high bit rates, as well as high frame rates. So it is going to drain your battery. For a full day's worth of shooting, I would recommend at least 4 to 5 of these to leave out any anxiety that you might have during a shoot. As you would expect in hotter climates, the fan is going to be working overtime, which is going to put a lot more pressure onto these little guys, which dovetails to an area of improvement. I wish Canon found a way to put the R3 battery in the C50. Any R3 shooter or 1DX shooter will tell you these things last forever. So I think if there's a way in the C50 Mark II, should there ever be one, to use the R3 battery with a little bit of modification to the body of the C50, I think that would be a very welcome improvement. Batteries aside, the C50 is an absolute workhorse, or it certainly has been in my experience. We shot it on a bus where space was limited, the conditions were pretty brutal. Luckily it was an electric bus, so there was some air conditioning, but the space, lighting and the temperatures were very challenging. But the C50, it did brilliantly. Going back to workflow, be warned, the amount of data that this thing captures, the quality of the footage you can achieve with the C50 means that it's very power and memory hungry. So make sure your computer or your laptop, it can handle the files, because you're going to need a lot of storage and a lot of RAM and a lot of processing power. And once you get used to its ecosystem, assuming you're not already, it goes from daunting to intuitive relatively quickly. The menus are huge. There are so many different options when you go through the menu. So it really helps to isolate all the things that you use quite regularly onto a custom menu, so you can get there even quicker. One of the things that I really enjoyed with the C50 is that I was able to use both screens all at the same time. And when I say both screens, I mean the LCD screen on the back as well as an external monitor. So what I was able to do was set the external monitor to false color and leave the smaller LCD screen on waveform. You can have them both on the same screen, but whilst I had access to both screens, I just split the two. One of the most common critiques of the C50 is its lack of ND filters. Since I'd picked up my first camera, polarizers and ND filters have always been a part of my workflow, so adding it onto the C50 really wasn't much of an issue. And if it means that the footprint and the overall size of the C50 can remain this size without the ND filters, well, for me, it's a worthwhile compromise. My biggest area of improvement is really the screen and its size. When I was shooting outdoors, I really struggled with the C50 screen because I couldn't see anything. Over the last few months, it's been so sunny in the UK, so it's really bright out. There's a lot of contrast, there's a lot of reflections on the screen. And when you're out and about, it's really difficult to read just exactly what the screen is showing you. So if you are going to use this outdoors, especially in brighter conditions, I would 100% recommend an external monitor. And when I was taking pictures, I kept putting the camera up to my face in the hope that I would find an EVF. So again, if not an EVF, perhaps, again, if there's ever to be a C50 Mark II, a bigger screen, I think would really, really help this camera. I've kept all 14 customizable buttons as they are. They're labeled on the body of the camera, so it just made sense to keep it as they are, bar one. Number 9, I've changed that to false color instead of peaking. I've been using autofocus, so I never felt the need to have peaking on. And lastly, in terms of ergonomics, once you put the top handle on, I'll show you, and you put said external monitor on, okay, and let's say you want to take advantage of the XLR mic, you have this little contraption which screws on here, and here's our problem. I can't put it on. The monitor gets in the way. It's either that or I'm doing something terribly wrong, and this microphone doesn't quite fit in here. Does it fit? Yeah, it just about fits in there. This microphone handle is quite girthy, so it won't go on there, but so you're going to need a bit more of a setup, i.e. some sort of cage to house your microphone should you want a run and gun setup. When it comes to the ergonomics of the C50, it's brilliant. The weight is very manageable and the overall build quality is excellent too. Over the past few months here in the UK, we've had a pretty serious heat wave, and despite my best efforts to try and overheat the C50 by shooting in 7K OpenGate at every opportunity, I'm pleased to report that it hasn't even come close. And really that should come as no surprise given the fact that the C50 is equipped with active cooling fans. But coming from a ex-R5 shooter and a current R5 Mark II shooter, that is not something you want to be taking for granted. I have made a separate video on my experience with the R5 Mark II. If you want to check that out, I'll leave it up on the screen now for you. If not, let's head back to the studio, aka my front living room. Is the C50 good enough to be an A-cam for solo shooters, for small to mid-sized production teams? I think having a few C50s is no bad thing at all. It's also a fantastic B camera for your bigger production teams, you know, people who have C80s and C400s, if they need something much smaller for interior car shots or where they need to rig it onto something. And I think the C50 complements solo shooters, small productions, medium, all the way to large productions in one capacity or another. When I shot the first bit of footage in the C50 and I looked at it in Premiere Pro, I was a bit annoyed. I was annoyed at how delicious that footage looked. Okay, there was a voice in my head that thought, how much better could it be than the R5 Mark II? And it wasn't a question of better, it was just different. I think that's where Canon get you. There's just something about the footage that just looked charmingly beautiful. It has this faded effect which just looks, dare I say it, a bit more cinematic, a little bit more filmic. Watching other people talk about the C50, I noticed a bit of a reoccurring theme, and it was the OpenGate. OpenGate this, OpenGate that. Well, the gates are open. So what does this mean? It means that you can take advantage of the full size of the sensor, vertically and horizontally, which means you can crop after shooting landscape into portrait, which is great. But to spend £3,500–4,000 on a camera just to be able to do that, in my opinion, is a bit of overkill. Let's face it, vertical content is being used on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikToks. This is especially true when algorithms are being changed almost on a daily basis. We've been told that the raw, unfiltered, unedited, natural footage is what people want. So where does that leave the likes of you and I, who like the more polished, cinematic, intentional content? So why would you go and spend £3,000–4,000 on a camera when you could do it on your phone and get more reach? Because that's what the algorithm says. Apparently the polished stuff looks like adverts or AI generated content, which is why for me, OpenGate is so much more than just vertical cropping. It's about being able to reframe after the fact, make artistic decisions in post, keyframe gentle pans and zooms, or go Christopher Nolan and use the full height and width of the sensor. So who is the C50 for? Well, for anyone who wants to grow as a filmmaker, because it has all the technology, all the features that you're going to want and need for the future. We're talking about marginal gains now when it comes to the technology that we find in these digital cameras. As long as you understand its limitations, I think the C50 is a fantastic tool for your journey into becoming a filmmaker. ND filters or battery life may be important to some, but not to others. Likewise with the EVF. Putting an ND filter on the end of your lens, to some it's no problem at all, but for others it's another hurdle that they may not want to overcome, in which case they can start looking at the C80. This is a fantastic hybrid camera, but it's no secret that it has video bias. So for anyone that's looking to offer photography as part of their offering, then the C50 is probably not the camera that I would go for. I'd probably be looking at the R5 Mark II. For automotive content creators, fantastic bit of kit. I appreciate that's a very narrow niche. For regular content creators, this is probably a bit of overkill, especially if you're the kind to do your running and gunning stuff. However, if you want to be more intentional with your shoot, stage, plan, prepare, and then shoot for high quality output, then yeah, it would make more sense. The amount of settings that you can customize with this camera, the amount of features that it has, from anamorphic lens support to the different frame rates, to different framing options, to different color profiles. Whatever your story, you can tell it with the C50. Couple that with its weight and its footprint, this thing's a beast. The crop shooting is an amazing feature, especially for efficiency and productivity. You shoot once and you get vertical as well as landscape all in the same shot. For me, the perfect camera is the one that you know inside out. One that you understand and one that fits into your workflow seamlessly. This is a great camera for my corporate clients, interviews, talking head pieces, testimonials or case studies. But given its size, its weight and its footprint, it's also a great option for my own work, for my passion projects, because I can take it anywhere with me. I think if people saw you out and about in cafes, restaurants, and just walking with this thing, they'd probably come up to you and ask you what you're doing, which could potentially get you to have some run-ins with some Canons, but it can also open up new doors and new opportunities for people who may need photography or videography. All there's left to say is a job well done for Canon. Thank you so much for the loan. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the C50, and I am seriously thinking about adding one, maybe two to my kit bag, depending on how the next few months go. And if you have enjoyed this video, got something out of it, and indeed made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. Consider subscribing to the channel, hit that like button, and leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think of the C50. Thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one.